company. Now, what is not, everybody talks about Reef as one of the founders, and that's true. He's this incredibly talented individual, still to disrupt something as complex as a networking space where you're building systems that go everywhere from the hardware to the software, from the silicon, all the way up to the applications. You need a very diverse set of skills, and Pradeep brought this incredible knowledge and passion and understanding for what had happened to the compute world, developing purpose-built silicon technology for compute to networking, but somebody needed the expertise in networking itself, in building networks and developing the interfaces by which people will operate networks. And that was actually another individual by the name of Dennis Ferguson, who's actually from Toronto. So actually one of Juniper's founders is in fact a Canadian founder who is still working here today, and one of the most brilliant men I have ever met. The respect that I have for this individual is paramount. And then you needed somebody that was more of an expert in systems. So Dennis brought networking expertise, had built networks in Canada, I think had like worked on Canada's back and just truly knew the amounts of doing that. And then you needed a systems person that could package this into packages that people could take, accept, and actually deploy. So it was that magic Juniper was up to doing, and it was, I mean, I cannot tell you compete against the 800-pound gorilla. And ultimately we can do it. It's this team. Imagine has been diverse in terms of the experience that I've gained. I've seen this company go through the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, face to the bust, where you could not cheer anybody up. From $240 stock price to $4. I mean, it was, you know, that was the time that really almost annihilated many startups in the Valley and elsewhere. But we survived this because we had a real company, real technology, great people, and we have a real powerhouse that fosters innovation, that helps people succeed in their entrepreneurial endeavors. And if there's anything that I personally can do to help that, I would like to do that. This is why I think this organization is such an important organization. You know, I ultimately in my career decided that I needed to come down here, but I don't think everybody in Canada needs to make a similar decision in order to achieve similar sort of careers. And I think in particular in the networking space, the talent that exists in Canada, you know, especially in the Ottawa region, is pretty incredible. And so the opportunity to leverage that talent to do something very special, meaningful, innovative for this particular industry is absolutely there. We have a team, in fact, it's a relatively small team, but it's a team that I would like to invest in over time that is developing some of the most important products that are at the forefront of this way of this transformation. And yeah, and like I said, this is sort of, I view this as a bit of an introduction, but I am here to help. If there's anything that I can do, you know, so I have a few more minutes. So if there are any thoughts or questions, I'd be very happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can move on.
Yeah. One of the few, I might be not as educated, I can hear what you want an engineer to see, even in the valley. Isn't that true?
Yes and no. There is sort of a, maybe it's a more of a newer, more recent phenomenon. Elon Musk is an engineer. Okay. Mark Zuckerberg is an engineer. So this has sort of become a little bit more trends. In particular, have started to get, for a company like Juniper that thrives on innovation, it's an important. But the last 5 to 10 years, it's been running business else, sort of built the skills that complement my engineering skills. And then, you know, we've got this great college, Stanford, that I've leveraged to do training. They have, like, for example, a 6-week intensive sleepover executive program, which I found very helpful. So yes, I mean, you're right, but I think it's changing somewhat.
So the other examples are founders. Obviously all founders by and large.
Yeah.
obviously you've made that transition to growth, but since you've got that engineering mindset, any tips on what you had to do with
18 years, right? So it wasn't an overnight thing. Learn from each and every step, build incredible relationships. The relationships that I built throughout the years, not just inside of the company, but with investors when these opportunities come about. I have never been one that has set for myself, I sort of shock people when I say this, a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. I've always just focused very much on the here and now, on thriving in the position that I'm in today. And what I've found is that when you do a really good job in what you are, your current responsibility, you do need to, at that point, raise your hand and say, yes, I want to be considered. And then a bit of fortune. You know, some of you might know, this sort of went in two separate seats, what I'm doing today. So I consider that, you know, a bit.
Go gain safe in your umbrella and differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I think you know, we leverage our size to our advantage. We are not a small little startup, and that, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a startup, but especially in this industry, it's sort of difficult to be heard and taken credibly because your customers are typically somewhat conservative. They're afraid to make a bet on their, you know, wide area networks, their data centers on start. That has happened and it has worked, of course, Juniper being a perfect example of that. But it's just more difficult today. But we're not that 800-pound gorilla, so if we can move far greater agility than they can. And middle size right now is sort of in some sense, and to get the go-to-market foot to loosen, you don't make the same mistakes. When you go from startup, you're a startup, you build that first product, it's a great hit. And you say, we don't want to be more than just a one hit. Let's work on the next one. The second one is a great hit. 40 to 40. And all of a sudden, you think anything you touch turns to gold. And then you go into that market, this market, that market, that market, and all of a sudden you've got this rude awakening because now you've woken up the beasts, the giants. They're targeting you. And success in this market is not necessarily self. And we went through this phase where we believed that in order to get to that, you know, big growth business units, which for a company of our size made no sense, and that hurt us. You know, again, when I say leverage your size to your advantage, if you sort of start behaving too much like a big company ahead of where you actually are in terms of your position in this industry, I don't think it's a good thing. So what I have been doing over the last few years, leading up to this role, and I put the final innovate. Effectively competing. The momentum that we're seeing now in the business as a result of the tough changes we had made last year to prune our focus, to organize effectively, has been really good.
Any comment on your entire at Juniper? How did culture scale, and were there challenges with culture scaling?
Yeah. So we went through periods where was where they were not. First things that I aspects of this job, you can have your HR department, you know, come up with all sorts of fancy ways to practice of the initiatives, the execution imperatives, the strategy, and the culture that I've communicated to the team. The thing that has resonated the most with everybody is my attention to the culture. That's where I've gotten the most amount of feedback. So it's important. It's very importantly unique, like any organization. Many people who have, I don't have a lot of benefit in comparing and contrasting it to other companies, right? But what I do is when we hire from outside, I take the opportunity to talk, you know, how it can collaborate. They up to help each other. We cross boundaries effectively, and all of that is stuff that I want to actually entertain. We don't put issues on the table, have the tough discussions about them, and solve them. You have to be careful of things like passive-aggressive culture, which we have suffered from. You know, you do that in the meeting, but then you go off and do something different than what you just not. That kind of stuff I have very low tolerance for, and it's not something that's easy to, you know, measure, and therefore the only solution to it is, in fact, an effective culture. It's up in the early on in the organization, a very, very good thing, because I know many of you have heard this. Changing it mid-flight is difficult later in the game. The last thing I'll say is, I started to do this because I've actually made it a requirement. But there's a lot more.
Just curious on the question of culture from a different slice. Is there a Canadian advantage? I mean, you're speaking to a room full of Canadians here. Is there anything that comes with being Canadian in this space?
You know, I've been asked this question before, and I have a very good answer for it, because you have, like, it's such a, and this is sort of a more open, incredible Canadian leader that have named Stephen Elon, that was Juniper's chief operating officer for just 1 year. So the only thing I pulled against him is the fact that he lasted a year and he took off to Microsoft. Or no, he ran Nokia. He took off to be the CEO.
Microsoft first.
Microsoft and then
president,
Nokia.
and then CEO Nokia.
And he infused into this company that openness and discipline that I really, really like. I just wish he would have lasted. That said, I actually have to run to my next meeting. Listen, I again want to welcome you.
We're on the clock, so we're going to